the 9th of April, Thursday morning, 2026. Buddha Dhamma, compiled by Somdet Prabhuta Gosacharya, English name P.A. Payutto. We're in chapter 19.6 from page 1009 to page 1920. This is going to be read in parts because it's a long chapter. Part 1, Summary of the Four Noble Truths. And A would be dukkha. B, samudaya, the source of dukkha. C, nirodha, the quelling or the stopping of the eliminating of dukkha. And D, magga, the way that which leads to the end of dukkha. Dukkha gets lost in definition, but the main word, some say, this is a note, that only arihats or enlightened ones, the one that have seen, truly understand what dukkha is. But on the surface, dukkha can be translated as stress, agitation, suffering, a state of confusion, dukkha. So instead of picking a word to describe it, I'm just gonna read out dukkha. So some of the, here it says suffering. I'm just gonna read dukkha, or replace it for dukkha. Chapter 19.6, Summary of the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths in Pali language is Ariya Satya. The commentaries offer some interesting analogies for the Four Noble Truths. First, an illness. Dukkha is similar to an illness. Samudaya is similar to the cause of the illness. Nirodha is similar to the freedom from illness. Magga is similar to the medicine for curing the illness. Another example is famine. Dukkha is similar to famine. Samudaya is similar to the absence of rain. Nirodha is similar to the abundance and plenitude. Magga is similar to a good rainfall. Another example is danger. Dukkha is similar to danger. Samudaya is similar to the cause of danger. Nirodha is similar to an escape from the danger. Magga is similar to the means from escaping the danger. Another example is burden or a heavy load on a person. Dukkha is similar to a heavy load. Samudaya is similar to carrying the heavy load. Nirodha is similar to putting down the heavy load. Magga is similar to procedures for putting down the heavy load. In the path to purity, in the Visuddhimagga, and the Sammohita-Vatthani Sutra, and the Sattamapakkhasani Sutra offer brief and contingent or contingent explanations for why Gautama Buddha arranged the Four Noble Truths in order that he did. A. Dukkha. The focus commences on dukkha in order to apply panya, wisdom. Dukkha is oppressive and affects all human beings. Whenever dukkha arises, it is arresting and kindles concern. Even if one looks beyond one's own personal experiences, one sees the various afflictions and difficulties that continually besets human beings on the normal state of affairs. Dukkha is apparent to all people. It manifests clearly. It impels interest and is thus suitable as a regular subject for contemplation, in particular as the starting point for the teaching of the law of Dhamma. Moreover, dukkha is considered displeasing and frightening for most people. Although it's unavoidable, they do not want to think about it. It makes one's people aware of how they are currently experiencing dukkha or generating problems for themselves. They may be shaken from their state of complacency. Gautama Buddha taught people about dukkha in order for them to begin to contemplate and solve their problems. By teaching the Four Noble Truths, beginning with dukkha, one commences with the problems at hand, with things that are clearly evident, when things are arresting, and more importantly, with things that have a direct relevance to people. One does not begin with abstract ideas. Fanciful notions or mere rhetoric when people, the teaching an individual, one speaks on the subjects pertinent to him or her own knowledge. And when teaching objectively, one speaks on the subjects relevant to all people in broad or in general. Gautama Buddha taught about dukkha, not to promote dukkha, but to act as the starting point for ending dukkha. Gautama Buddha knew that dukkha can be brought to cessation. It is not a compulsory or permanent condition. Life is frustrating and it is still disturbed by dukkha. If one is able to bring an end to dukkha, or if one becomes skilled at solving problems, then life becomes peaceful and truly happy. Solving problems is not achieved by avoiding or turning a blind eye to dukkha, just the opposite. It is to achieve by acknowledging and facing dukkha. This does not mean simply enduring dukkha or generating more dukkha, but rather it means to gain insight into dukkha in order to be able to be free of it. Instead of accumulating dukkha, one attends to it with wisdom. Gaining insight is equivalent to performing the correct duty, vice versa. Dukkha, that is, comprehensive understanding, is parina. One understands the nature of dukkha, where dukkha arises, and to the extent of the problems. Often people avoid dukkha and run away from problems. Even though they know that problems exist, they only have a vague or confused understanding about them. By understanding dukkha, one responsibility in the area is accomplished. This is similar to a doctor who diagnoses the symptoms of an illness and understands its nature, thus fulfilling one stage in the process of curing it. It is not our responsibility to eliminate or abandon dukkha, because cessation is not found at suffering itself. One must dispel it at its root, at its causes, at its foundation. Trying to avoid and abandon dukkha itself is like treating an illness only at its symptoms, say by taking medicine in order to alleviate the pain. The illness has not yet been cured, and one must continue to search for its causes. Just as a doctor studying the nature of illness must also study about the human body, which is the home of illness, so too a practitioner who studies the nature of dukkha in order to bring about its end must study all aspects of human life which constitute the basis of dukkha, along with the nature of conditioned phenomena which play a participatory role. The gist of the Four Noble Truths is to recognizing dukkha as it truly is, and to discern the true nature of human life in the world around us. B. Samudaya, the source of dukkha. Searching for the causes of dukkha rather than attributing blame. If one wishes for the cessation of suffering, one must eliminate its causes. When one recognizes the nature of one's own suffering, how and where it manifests, it is time to investigate further for its causes in order to accomplish the duty of banishment or elimination, pahana. In many cases, however, when searching for the source of suffering, people flee from the truth. They tend to look outside of themselves or focus on the events removed from what is happening in the present moment. They therefore look for an external agent whom they lay blame or try to distance themselves from that problem so as to feel that they are not responsible. Lay blame on external factors leads to these false truths or doctrines. The first, Bupeka Vata, doctrine of the past action, karma, the belief that all present happiness and suffering results from the past actions, the claim that all happiness and suffering is connected to the past. Number two, Itsara Nimana Vata, the doctrine on the Supreme God, the belief that all present happiness and suffering is created by a supreme entity, a God. Whether one is escaping ill fortune or seeking good fortune, one thus relies on the providence of a divine being or the assistance of a divine being, a higher power. The third is Ahetu Vata. This is the doctrine of fate, the belief that all happiness and suffering is random and pointless, without causes and conditions. One believes that neither positive nor negative events can be altered. When the destination time arises, they will occur automatically. Buddha Dhamma rejects these doctrines because they oppose the natural law of causality, of cause and effects. For example, if this shows up, this will happen. If this is eliminated, this will happen, and so forth. The Buddha's teaching encouraged people to search for the causes of suffering in conformity with the laws of nature, beginning with those causes existing within an individual. Volitional actions, karma, thoughts, words, and deeds, both good and bad, those already performed, those presently being performed, and those stored up as character traits. They have people examine their behavior in relation to things and things around them. To check if their actions are proper or improper in regard to various environmental factors. On the deeper level, Gautama Buddha described tanha, the negative aspect of craving, as the source of human suffering. The negative aspects of desire, craving, causes one to act, express oneself, and relate to the world incorrectly. One does not act with the knowledge of truth, but rather one acts influenced by pleasure and aversion, by likes and dislikes, or by shielding oneself with such defilements as fear, conceit, envy, and distrust, which are consequences of the negative aspects of the desire, craving, tanha. There are three forms of craving. Craving for sensual pleasures, kama tanha, the wish to obtain, to acquire, to consume. Second, craving for existence, bhava tanha, the wish to become, to endure, to have eternal life, and the craving for annihilation. And the third is craving for annihilation, the non-existence, vibhava tanha, the wish to cease existing, the wish for extinction. And on the deeper level, Gautama Buddha described the process of the tilakkhana, the dependent origination. In which ignorance acts as the root. Tilakkhana and dependent origination are two different things. Tilakkhana is anattata, dukkhata, anicca. But the process of dependent origination, in which ignorance acts as the root of craving, the source from which all suffering flows. When one eliminates ignorance and craving, the causes for suffering, one is not subject to the obstructive power of defilements. One is able to relate to the world, to other people, to other creatures, and the nature of wisdom. One has the understanding of continuality at all things, which enable one to solve problems in its optimal way, available to human intelligence. Although some minor suffering remains, it is merely the dukkha inherent in nature and incapable of overpowering one's mind. When one is free from the internal subjugation of the negative aspects of desire, craving, tanha, the only remaining responsibility is to reflect on the circumstances which one is engaged and is respond with wisdom for the happiness and well-being for others. On the contrary, as long as people are still oppressed by corrupting and distorting defilements of the mind, they have no chance to truly solve problems or dispel suffering, both within themselves and outward in society. In most cases, when people try to solve problems, they tend to make matters worse, either by increasing the problems at hand or by creating new ones. When they experience suffering, rather than bring it to an end or reducing it in a way of wisdom, they are coerced by the negative aspect of desire, craving, tanha, to compensate for the situation by increasing their original suffering or by venting the suffering outwards and harming people and society. Human suffering arises and exists in this way, subject to dictates of tanha, the negative aspects of desire, craving, and the support for ignorance without end. C. Nirodha, the cessation of suffering. Wisdom leads to unrestricted happiness and compassion. Once Gautama Buddha has described suffering and its causes, which are matters of adversity and dissatisfaction. He assaged that the minds of those disciples receptive to this teaching and gave them hope by teaching the third noble truth of cessation, revealing that the oppression of suffering can cease. The basic problems of life can be solved. A desirable way out exists because the cause of suffering can be eliminated and brought to an end. Suffering exists dependent on causes. When the causes are removed, the results of suffering likewise ceases. When suffering ceases, the state of no suffering, a freedom from suffering, arises automatically. Mental disturbance is transformed into the state of freedom, clarity, purity, and at ease. For this reason, cessation is presented on the third noble truth, both because of the natural sequence of events and because of its aptness as a teaching method, which kindles interest, promotes understanding, and encourages practice, leading to true realization. When one eliminates the negative aspects of desire, tanha, craving, along with its companion defilements, which seduce the mind, one is no longer harassed by agitation, yearning, anxiety, fear, animosity, loneliness, or boredom. One does not need to rely on the temporary happiness of fleeing from these disturbing mind states, of trying to bury them or replace them with something else, of venting one's frustration outwards. By attending to suffering at its causes, the mind is now liberated, independent, peaceful, possessed of pure happiness. It is not assaulted by lingering doubts and fears. The noble, constant state of mind is one of joy, clarity, and ease. One has reached a spiritual perfection, fulfilled the act of realization called Satchikriya in Pali language. Similarly, when the mind is liberated from mental defilements and entanglements, when it is free and bright, ignorance no longer has manipulative power. As a consequence, wisdom is also purified and freed from the deceptive and corrupting influence of these defilements. One is able to reflect on the things correctly and in harmony with truth and discern things according to cause and effect. When ignorance, avijja, and the negative aspect of desire, tanha, craving, are not present to cause misunderstanding, panya, wisdom, is the principal agent to guide behavior. One then acts, expresses oneself, relates to the world with a thorough knowledge of the ways of nature. Apart from being the bedrock of internal purity and freedom, outwardly, wisdom helps for applying one's personal knowledge and capabilities to solve other people's problems and to generate true well-being. A person's intelligence is used to the fullest extent without impediment or distortion. It is used only for wholesome purposes. This is to live one's life guided by wisdom. Moreover, when a person is free, steady, and naturally happy, not self-obsessed, not looking for things to consume, not trying to protect or reinforce the burden of self-importance, the mind becomes expansive, and the feeling of freedom pervades outwards. One becomes receptive to the happiness of suffering of fellow creatures, and one wishes to provide assistance. Wisdom is then provided with the power of compassion, which helps to guide one's behavior. One then lives fully for the well-being and happiness of others. When one is free from grasping and selfish attachment, one is able to perform various and kindly deeds in one pointed, resolute, and devoted way. Inwardly, one is free, happy, and pure. Personal well-being has been brought to perfection. Atta hita sampati, that has a personal well-being has been brought to perfection. That's what that means. So that outwardly, one acts to support other people. Parahita pati pati, Together they complete the attributes one who has realized cessation, nirota. The person who walks the noble path does not need to wait and experience the blessing of benefits of realization of nibbida, nibbana, nirvana, the heart of cessation. Even while walking correctly along the path, one is able to consistently witness the increasing fruits of practice, both in regards to personal benefits and in regards to those blessings one can bestow on others. Now, in the ascending order, cessation, nirota, is outlined by 5 stages. The first, vikampana nirota. This is the cessation of suffering and defilements through suppression. To use concentration in order to make the mind tranquil, relaxed, free from dullness and anxiety. In particular, this means applying concentration on the level of absorption, jhana. During the entire period that one dwells in the absorption, jhana, the defilements are stilled. One experiences happiness, independence of sensual desire. Second, tanga nirota. This is the cessation of suffering and the defilements by way of opposing or opposite qualities. Most importantly, this refers to the ability to reflect wisely, to understand the truth of phenomena, that they exist according to the law of causality, and to be attenuated to by bearing in mind their causes and conditions. They are not subject to people's desires and attachment. With such wisdom, a person acts correctly and relates to things with understanding, goodwill, and inner freedom. Wisdom that clearly discerns things according to the truth is called vipassana panya, insight wisdom. Mental impurity and suffering is extinguished as long as the wisdom functions. The mind is calm, pure, bright, and joyous. It leads to mental refinement and generates deeper levels of wisdom. The third is samucceta nirota, cessation of suffering and the defilements through severance. One realized transcendent state of the path, beginning with the path of asotapanna, the straight entry. Defilements and suffering ceases completely and irrevocably according to the specific stage of the path. The fourth is pati siti nirota, cessation of suffering, the defilements through stealing. One realized transcendent fruit. One is noble being from the sotapanna upwards. Defilement ceases and the mind is pure and free according to specific stages of being a noble person. The fifth is nitsarana nirota, cessation of defilements through relinquishment, the state of true and perfect and deliverance, nibbida, nibbana, nirvana. D. The path leading to the cessation of suffering. The arrival of the Taratanatai, which means the triple gem, comprising of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, dispels the dependence on the faith and supernatural powers. When one knows suffering and its origin and recognizes the goal, which is cessation and the quelling and elimination of suffering, it is then time to engage in practice. When one sees clearly the goal to reach, its attributes and its attainability, one practices to realize that goal accordingly. If one does not know what the goal is, in which direction to go, one will not know how to proceed. For this reason, in terms of the relationship between four truths, it is appropriate for the path to be put at an end. Also, in regard to teaching, spiritual practice generally requires a lot of strength and energy. If practitioners do not recognize the value of the goal, they will lack willpower. And if they are convinced The practice is arduous. They have lost the heart of even refuse to proceed. Even if they engage with the practice, they do so as if coerced against their will or illicitly. Their progress will probably be fruitless. Their progress will probably be fruitless. On the contrary, if one sees the value of the goal, one will be happy to put forth their own effort. The greater the goal, the desire to reach it, the stronger is the motivation for practice. When a person sincerely desires the goal, he or she will fight to achieve it, no matter how difficult the practice is to reach it. This is another reason why Gautama Buddha mentioned Nirodha before the path, so that the listener sees the values of and develops a wish for Nirodha, generating an enthusiasm to learn the methods of practice and to apply them. When Gautama Buddha revealed how Nirodha is truly a worthy goal, the listeners were determined to hear the path and committed to applying it to the practice. They resolved to follow the path and welcome the hardships required to do so. When people search for the cause of suffering, they tend to attribute blame outwardly or look for things that are as far from their own sphere of responsibility as possible. Similarly, when people look for a remedy for suffering, they tend to look for things externally to find some protection in order to release them from responsibility or to remove suffering on their behalf. In both cases, people are hiding from the truth, not daring to look at the truth of suffering and avoid responsibility. This is similar to a person who flees from danger and looks for a place to bury his head in the sand and hides his face. He thinks he has escaped danger, even though he is still surrounded by it. This behavior gives rise to dependence on external things, say by beseeching what is considered holy, making offerings to a higher power or someone to come and save them, waiting for divine acts of power, or simply leaving things up to fate. Buddhism teaches that dependence on such things or such a resignation to fate is not the way to security and safety and does not lead to true deliverance from suffering. The correct way of dealing with suffering is to have firm confidence in the merits of the Taratanatai, the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, to make the mind peaceful and strong, and to apply wisdom by looking at problems objectively, to see them as they truly are, to solve them at their root causes. In other words, with confidence in the triple gem, one knows how to solve problems according to the Four Noble Truths, to know suffering accurately, to investigate and discover its causes, to recognize the end of suffering which should be realized, and to develop the appropriate methods of dealing with suffering directly at the source which leads to realization of the goal. To sum this all up, one develops the Eightfold Path. Practicing in this way leads to the true end of suffering, as confirmed by Gautama Buddha. This is a verse from the Dhammapada, verse 188 through 192. People in large numbers, threatened by danger, seek refuge in mountain forests and sacred groves and trees. But no such refuge is safe. No such refuge is supreme. Not by resorting to such a refuge is one free from all misery. One who goes to refuge to the awakened Buddha, to the righteous law of Dharma, and to the order of the Sangha, who sees clearly with wisdom the Four Noble Truths, suffering, the origin of suffering, the transcendence of suffering, and the Noble Eightfold Path leading to the end of suffering. This indeed is a set refuge. This indeed is the refuge supreme. By reaching such a refuge, one is free from all misery. A recollection of the Gautama Buddha provides us with the confidence that every person is endowed with intelligence and capability, which can be tainted or developed to perfection. We are able to realize the truth, to arrive at utter freedom from suffering, to transcend mundane phenomena, and to possess supreme virtues, which even the Devatas and the Brahmas, gods, revere. In this respect, the great teacher, Gautama Buddha, acted as a guide, as the leader, as the head, the forerunner. If people who depend on supernatural power know how to train themselves well, they will see that there is nothing with the gods or the sacred forces that are able to do which equals the virtuous deeds stemming from a well-cultivated human mind. A recollection of the righteous Dharma provides us with confidence that the truth is naturally exists in phenomena, and all things exist according to causes and conditions. If one is able to discern things that they truly are, to apply the understanding in a beneficial way, to relate to things with insight, and to deal with them at their source, then one can solve problems at the best possible way. One will realize that the truth live an excellent life. A recollection of the noble Sangha provides us with the confidence that a virtuous community is founded on truth. It is comprised of members who are free from suffering. Although they have arrived at varying degrees of spiritual accomplishment, they are united, equal in the face of the law of Dhamma. Every person participates in the building this community by understanding and practicing in according to the Dhamma. If one lacks confidence in the triple gem, then one must depend on external things, like petitioning sacred forces, praying to divine beings. But if one has confidence in the triple gem, then one studies the ways of bringing suffering to an end through insight into causes and conditions outlined in the Four Noble Truths. One practices spiritual cultivation in accord with the Buddha's path. Buddha Dhamma, we're going to leave off in the middle of page 1920.